Welcome back, CSC 200 class, to part 2 of display B, and I guess we'll call this SpongeBob database insert, because that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be inserting, and it's part B of the EX7. So however you want to call it, that's the one we're working on, and what we're going to do is we're going to get started with our PHP file. Now remember, it's a PHP file, but there's PHP and HTML in here, so we have a mix of things. It starts off with some PHP, and I left the tags in here. This is the opening PHP that has the bracket and the question mark in PHP, and the last one just has the question mark and the bracket going the other way, closing it up. And there's some more PHP in the middle that we're going to be working with. And I did leave the closing. There's a little closing function here, a closing method that actually closes out. So, but we're going to get started with just some variables in the beginning. And we've done these before. If you go back, even if I go back to EX5, you can see we did this kind of thing where we actually set up variables. These are the variables that actually helped us connect to our database, so that we knew what was we had to use our localhost, our password, our username, our password, and the database name. So we're going to use this stuff in here, and I gave you the little, and you could copy and paste this if you want, or you could go in here. I gave you some hints here, but if you want to see what it looks like, how it's set up, remember the variables have a $sign. So they always kind of have this $sign. So if you wanted to just, you could copy these from your EX5. Although I think there's one in our first, I think we had these in our, no, I guess we didn't. We didn't use those in our part A. So I'm going to go back to here, and I'll put these in here. Now we're going to change these a little bit. I'm going to call it host name. Now it doesn't matter as long as you're consistent, but actually I'm going to call this host, because that's what I say to call it up here. I gave you some hints here. So I said, just call it host. It's shorter, so I'll just call it host. And for username, we'll shorten that. We'll just call it user. Look at how nice and short that is. We'll just call this one PW. That'll be shorter. And we'll still call this DB name. So those will be our variables. And we don't need, you can use single quotes here. These have double quotes. We could use single quotes or double quotes here. But I'll leave them in here, and I'll kind of just leave an extra space in between the next one. So that sets up our variables for connecting to our server, and then after we set up these variables, we're going to try and connect. So we're going to review that from some of our earlier exercises. So then I'm going to set up variables that actually represent the form fields. It says it right here, and this is the one where you do that $sign post name. And again, if you're not familiar with this, just go back to display A, because this is the one that looked like this, and we're going to use the exact same one. So you could copy these right from your display A.php, the first name, because these are the ones that actually they set variables that equal whatever people entered into the form. So this helps transfer the information from an HTML form into PHP, so it can be processed more through the PHP scripts. So you could just copy this. You could retype it if you want practice typing it, but I'll just copy that and go back to display B, and I'm going to put that right here. And I'll just leave one space between the next comment. And these should be exactly the same. The variables should have a $sign, and remember they should have a $sign underscore post, because that's the method we're using. And then in these brackets, we should put what we're using. These are actually the column names. It's actually using name, but our names are the same as what's going to be in our database. So this should be fine. So we're going to be using these variables that people enter. So when they post that information, or when you post your information into the form, it's going to be pulling this information, and it's going to be traveling in these variables now. And you're still going to be using column names, but it's going to be traveling in these, and that's how it's going to get kind of converted. So the next part says create a variable, and you could read these. Create a variable connection that connects to MySQL server using MySQLi connect, and you're like, what is that? I can't remember I don't know what he's talking about here. Let's start it out. We'll create a variable, and it says the variable is called con. So let's create a variable called con, and we'll just use $sign con and equal, because that's the way we start a variable. And then we're going to use this MySQLi connect kind of a method here. Now, if you totally don't even remember what I'm talking about here, this is the one that connects just to the host, not to the database. It verifies if you connect, and it's going to use these things. The localhost, the root. We're not going to use the database name right now. And also, don't forget to change this, just as I look at this. Remember, this should be SpongeBob DB. I should have left it in there wrong because that would have generated an error at some point, but that's what we're going to make sure you have your correct database name in there. But for here, if you don't know what this is, then we're going to go look that up. So I'm going to go here to PHP, and where you're going to find some of these things, if you go to PHP and you scroll down, you're going to look for these in the references down here. You're going to go down to PHP reference and look for these PHP MySQLi. And you'll see kind of a reference of all these different methods. And these will kind of help you out. So, you know, there's nothing wrong with checking these things out because you're not going to memorize what all this stuff means. So the one said it was, you know, I can't even remember what it said. It said MySQLi Connect. So let's check that out. In here, I'll just look for, and here's commit, here's connect, error, erno. These are with the ones with error messages. We're just going to use this one. And here's the MySQLi Connect. It says opens a new connection. That's exactly what we want it to do. Let's click on it just to see what the code looks like. And this should look familiar. And now I'm going to actually copy it right out of here, but I'm not going to use the PHP tags because we already have them. And also make sure we change this because it says, I'll just copy it from here because we already have I already started the con with 2 N's. So I'll copy it right from here and copy this, and I'll just leave the opening and closing tags alone, and I'll copy it. Not really looking at it too much yet. And we're going to change it, and I'll come in here and I'll just paste it right here. And there it is, and I could take a space out of there. Now this stuff here, we don't want to use these. These are actually the actual quotes. What we want to use are, I'm just going to wipe these out of the parentheses. And what we want to put in here are host, user, and password. And we can use commas when you use them. And if you're not sure, go back and look. Did it use commas? Yes, it uses commas. So we're going to use commas. And we're going to do host first. That's easier to type. So I'll do host, comma, and you can use a space, or you don't have to use a space. $, and I'll do user with no E, and then I'll do a comma, and I'll do $, password. And that's all you need in there, and that should connect. And remember, the variable represents the connection, and I have 2 equals in here, so I'll take that out. And this will be MySQLi Connect, and the colors look okay so far, so that's going to connect. Now, if we want to connect, and now this uses this kind of error message kind of thing, and I even though this is fine, if you could just use this as is, I'd rather have you, understand the way we did it the first time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take this out. We're not going to use the error, even though the error message is good to have, but until you understand things, just put in the $con here, because what you want to do is you want to verify if the connection is working. So this variable represents the connection, so you're saying if the connection, you don't have to say if it is true, you can just say if the connection. It kind of assumes it's already true. Although you could put equals true, but we're just going to put if the connection. That means if it's working. We're going to echo. Now this says failed to connect. We're going to say connect because we're not going to use the negative first. We're actually going to use the positive. So we're going to say if it connects, we're going to say connected to, and it's going to be localhost, except what we're going to do is we're going to put in the name localhost. So I'm going to put right after here, and I'll get rid of this as well. And remember, when we want to concatenate a variable, which is what we're going to do, we're going to concatenate this host. I'm just going to do a space dot space, and then I'll put in host, and then I'll do space dot space, and then I'll finish it off. And you don't really have to finish off anything, but if you want to, you could put quotes and then just put a period in it. And then you should always, with PHP, always put your semicolon. It doesn't like when you forget the semicolon. Some languages, they don't care that much. This one, they care. So you're going to get an error if that doesn't work. So that basically says if. This is an if-else statement. It says if you're connected, or if you're connected, then echo, which is basically printing to the page, echo connected to, and then it should say the host name, which should say localhost. You could put localhost in there, but we're using variables to represent that. And then it's just going to put a period at the end. And here we have an extra space, so it doesn't jam the name right up against the colon. Over here, we don't need one because there could be a period right after the host name. So now if it doesn't connect, then that's when we do an else. So we're going to do an else here. Now you could type else right here, and then you need another opening and closing curly bracket. So sometimes you'll see this, and I'll even tab this in a little. Sometimes you'll see, else on the same line with the closing bracket of the first one and opening up the second one. That's the way you'll see it sometimes, even though it doesn't. It would make more sense to kind of be on its own line. And what we're going to put here, we'll put another echo statement, and we'll just put echo not connected. And actually, you could just put not connected to server. Because if I'm not going to put the server name in there, because if it's not connected to it, it's not going to pick up the name anyway. So it's not going to, I don't think it's going to pick up that variable name anyway, although it might, but I'm just going to not put it in. So that way I'll know when I see localhost, I know I'm connected, and when I don't, I know I'm not connected. I mean, I could even put a capital, I could put not connected to server and an exclamation point. So it's, more of a warning here. So we're going to see if that works first. And again, make sure that you have, two opening and closing for each if and for the else. So there's an if. Now again, if could go up here. It could kind of be set up like that. So that the opening bracket is right after the if condition. So it's if the connection, it's going to echo a good thing. It's going to say connected to localhost. And then if not, it's going to say not connected to server. And it's just kind of generic, so it won't have the server name there. So that's pretty much it. So, you could have used the errno or the error message and all that, but I'd rather have you just get used to the if-else and make sure that you're kind of, in command of this a little bit and have some flexibility. Then if you decide, oh, I really want to show the error message, then you could go back and do that. But I want to make sure you know how to do this, that you know how to if-else works, and you know how to put in your own echo your own messages in there. So that's just connecting to the server. So we haven't done too much yet. We just connected to the server. Hopefully, we'll test that we are. And then we're also going to create a variable called selectDB that connects to the DB name using MySQLi selectDB. So now there's another one. If you're not sure about that one, go back and look for that one. I'm just going to hit the backspace here, and I'll just go through this list, and they should have one called MySQLi selectDB, and it's in alphabetical order after the myselect, or after the MySQLi. So I'll look for selectDB, and there it is. Now this one's a little tricky because here's the function, the MySQLi selectDB function. I'm calling them methods because they're kind of smaller because we're not writing out functions, but it is kind of a function. Now it says MySQLi connect errno, so you're not even seeing the DB. The DB part is actually down here. And here's the DB. So all that we really need here is really this thing. I'm just gonna copy that, and it tells you here, MySQLi selectDB. All that it needs is the connection, which is that $con, comma, and then the database name. So we're gonna do it just like the other one. So I'm gonna copy this right from here, just this part. I don't need this because this is just our regular connection, just like the one we already did. So we don't need to do that again. We just need this selectDB. So I'm going to go here and I'll put this in, and I'm just going to paste this here, and it says create a variable that connects. So what I'm going to do is you could just give a variable name. So it says, and here whenever I put things in brackets, I want you to use that. So you could use $selectDB, everything's lowercase there, and then space equals. So this variable selectDB is equal to that, and make sure they have con in there. So I'm going to make sure it's two n's, and then also this thing I can keep the comma in there, but this thing is going to be DB name. So I'm going to use the DB name in there. So I'm going to make sure I put $DB name, and that will connect. And as I'm looking here, make sure you put your semicolon after every statement that you have. So that's the variable here. And the nice thing about a variable is then I could copy this. You might say, why are you copying this? I'm just going to actually do another if-else statement and just make sure that's connecting to the database. And so then I don't have to do if-con, I can do if-selectDB. So if it's connecting to the database, and I forgot make sure I close up that parentheses there. I want to make sure I close that up. So, and then I'm going to paste this in here. So now I'm saying if selectDB, which represents connecting to the database, I'm going to say connect to DB name. And I could copy this. The more you copy things, I guess that's easier, less chance of screwing it up. So it should say connecting to DB, and I could even say, I'll put a space and say database. That way it'll say like SpongeBob DB database, so I'll know I'm connected to the database. So, you know, if I'm connected, it'll say connected to SpongeBob database, and then if not, I'll say not connected to, and I'll just put database. So I can use some code that I already have here. So it's just another if-else, except this time instead of testing the connection, we're just testing the connection to the database. So it's using the connection variable. That's why variables are helpful, because they kind of are a little shortcut, so we don't have to write as much things inside of parentheses and make really long statements. We can just kind of plug little things in here. It looks like I accidentally took out a parentheses in here. So let me just check everything that looks okay. Make sure I have semicolons. Again, you don't need semicolons after curly brackets, just after these kind of open statements here that end in a string. So this is just a string. This is a string that has a concatenated variable in there, and everything looks okay so far. So that's the first part. This is all the connection part here. So this is just the, you know, this isn't the good stuff yet. This is just making sure you connect. Now, to make sure I connect, I'm going to save this. I just did a bunch of work, so I'm going to make sure I save this, and I'll see if I connect. Now, what I can do is I can go in here and I can make sure that I go to. Now, you could look up here. You could go to localhost and you could just go to EX7. And if you just want to look at this page before you're entering anything in, because you may not want to enter anything in yet, and you may not, because you're going to have a problem doing that anyway. You know, or even worried about that. You can just go in here and just put in EX7 display B and just go here and just look at that. So if I refresh it here, it will show me. Then I don't have to go through that first form. I'm just looking at this page. Now it's not showing me anything down here because I'm not printing anything out yet, or I'm not displaying anything. But it does say connected to localhost, connected to SpongeBob database, that's exactly what I want. So so what we did worked. Now the only problem, it's jammed together here right after that. That's easy to fix. And if you think about how would you fix that, we basically have whatever is being echoed here, and then whatever is being echoed again is right after it without any break in it. So if you want to put a break between this kind of display echo message and this echo message, you could just go right inside the quote here. You could put a line break, or you could put in a P. If you put in a P, it's going to have like an extra space in it. So I'll put a P there, and I'll even put one here just in case we get an error message. That way, at least we'll have that. And you could even mess around here and say, well, you know, if I didn't, let's say I got, you know, user wrong or something, I'll save it, and let's see what happens here if that affects my connection. Oh, yes, it says not connected to server, not connected to database. So it's having a problem with both here. And it's good to kind of check that out sometimes. So I'll put in root. Didn't seem to mind about the localhost name, but it seems to mind about the username. So I'll put back localhost back here. And then if it can't connect there, it's not going to connect to the database. And let me just, you know, I'll mess up some. I'll just put sponge here, and I'll save it and see if it connects to the database. It still might, but it shouldn't. Let me refresh it. So it's connected to localhost, not connected to the database. And that's what should happen, because I messed up the name there, because it's not seeing the SpongeBob database. So the names are important, case is important, all that. So I'll put that back, save it, and I'll just go and test it again. Now it's connected to SpongeBob database, it's connected to localhost, display updated database. So now we do the fun part. We're actually going to be able to add elements to our database, and that's kind of the fun part, not having to go through PHPMyAdmin, but actually doing some of these here. So we have some work to do in Atom or brackets, whatever one you're doing. So we did a bunch of kind of PHP up here. Now we get into our table, and we just have a couple different things that we're going to do in here, and I still have little kind of hints in here to help you through that. So when you need to create a variable, I tell you what variable name to use, and I also show you what are some of the things you need to put in here. And you know, so we'll kind of go through these a little bit. Let me take another break here for part 2, and then we'll kind of move on. Part 3 will be kind of working on the display portion.